I'm Gaviola. Welcome to the Peak on Global, where we break down what's trending in the business world and what you need to know to stay ahead of the curve. Joining me now is Chang from the Peak podcast. Welcome, Brett.
Hey, Ann, great to be with you again.
Well, the nostalgia factor is pretty high with our first topic. It's been about a decade since Zellers shuttered most of its locations across Canada, but now it's making a comeback within the Hudson's Bay Company. What do you think of this move, Brett?
Well, the history behind Zellers is fascinating. And so what happened is Zellers was kind of a booming discount retailer for a long time. And then what happened is they ultimately went out of business, but those leases were still held on to and were sold to Target. And so Target bought all of those leases. They expanded across the country very quickly, and some might say too quickly, when they were then forced to shut down. And then Zellers never really came back. But now the Bay is trying to revive that, as nostalgia for these older brands is at an all-time high.
Yeah, I remember the great Target experiment in Canada. I was pretty hopeful that it would go better than it actually did. Do you remember this brand at all, Brett?
I remember it fondly. I remember, in particular, the restaurant in the Zellers. I think they had some type of discount for kids. And so my mom would always take me and we'd have lunch there. And yeah, look, I don't have any memories beyond that. I'm not sure what they sold. I'm not sure what the goods were, but I remember the restaurant really well.
There's been a lot of buzz on social media about those restaurants. Are they coming back? I've seen the photos. They don't look particularly appealing to me, but you're right. Nostalgia factor's high. They don't look particularly healthy, but again, that's neither here nor there. I want to talk a little bit about the timing of all this. I think it's interesting. There are signs that inflation is peaking, but we know that based on the latest snapshot, inflation's still running pretty hot, an annual rate of 7.6% as of July. Do you think there's an appetite for this kind of retail offering given this environment? Is this how HBC appeals to the Walmart, the Dollarama, the Giant Tiger crowd?
That's absolutely right. So I think there's twofold here, which is one, HBC is looking to diversify their spaces. Right now, they've got this incredible retail footprint. You have to think that they've got some of the most prime real estate across the country, and they're thinking through, well, how do we put more stuff in there? They just did a deal with MEC. They've done deals now with smaller boutique retailers like Pusateri's and the Drake General Store in Toronto, and they're looking to maximize that space. And so for them, what they see this as is an opportunity to bring some of that discount retailer product offerings into their own already established real estate footprint. So it could be a really interesting opportunity. I think the challenge for HBC, and this is a challenge that they've had for a few years now, is that they've simply just been adding more and more stores within the Bay. And so you've got Saks now, you've got these boutique retailers, you had clothing lines like Topshop and Topman. And so at some point, they really do need to kind of narrow in on what their actual product offering is. But it's an interesting experiment. We'll see how it goes.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk now about small businesses. I think it segues nicely. According to a lobby group that represents them, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, bankruptcies and closures of mom and pop shops are rising. Many of these businesses still haven't recovered from everything that impacted their ability to welcome customers since March 2020. What do you think of all this, Brett?
Well, it's really tough for small businesses, and they have a number of different issues that are facing them that are driving these shutdowns, ranging from the debts that they took on during the pandemic just to stay alive, the increased interest rates on that debt that they're going to have to pay that they're still struggling to afford. You're looking at a broader downturn in the economy where consumers are starting to pull back on spending in preparation for a downturn. And so there's a number of real factors at play here. And I think the interesting thing too is that the survey found that most businesses were just going out of business. Bankruptcies and restructuring, that wasn't really in the cards for them. And so it's going to be interesting to see how small businesses deal with this as they go through such challenging times.
Yeah, that's a really good point. A lot of these small businesses are going to be going the bankruptcy route. They'll just not be there one day, and that's going to have a significant impact on the kind of characteristics, the things that we like to see in our neighborhoods. Another thing that is particularly interesting to me is a phenomenon that we saw during the pandemic. This rise in sentiment, we saw this in poll after poll, Canadians saying they want to support local. But what we know is that the pandemic accelerated customer interest in a couple of things. Big box stores, that's the opposite of those mom and pop shops, and the convenience of home delivery services. A lot of small businesses can't afford to offer that kind of thing. My question is, do you think that this buy local movement was just a flash in the pan?
Well, and you really tied that back to the conversation that we just had about Zellers. There is obviously going to be a push if there is some type of economic downturn to lower cost goods. In many instances, these smaller boutique and local shops, they just can't match the prices of the big box stores. They just don't have the scale to be able to buy the inventory at those rates from the wholesalers and the manufacturers themselves. And so it's very difficult for them to compete. And if there is an economic downturn, and that still remains to be seen how severe or how long this might look like, but if it does last for a while, customers really are going to be looking at their wallets and ultimately going to be making decisions based on their pricing power. And that's going to really hurt these small businesses. So while in theory it's nice and really great to support local businesses, and I try to do everywhere I can, for a lot of people, it's just not practical.
Yeah, it's more difficult at times when you compare it to a big box store to do that kind of one-stop shop. But it is certainly on my radar. And something else on my radar is a pretty important milestone that we need to discuss next. So a year ago, you started your business. You birthed your very first Peak Daily podcast with Jay Rosenthal. Fast forward to today, it is the number one business news podcast in Canada. I have to say, congratulations, Brett. I'm really proud of you.
Oh, thanks so much, Anna. We couldn't have done it without you and the whole Chorus and Global team. Your support really allowed us to extend our audience, to reach new people, and that's been super helpful. And so we're really excited about this. And it's a real honor to wake up every morning and talk to Canadians about these really important issues that's happening in Canada, but also around the world.
And I mean, I've been a big fan of the Peak Daily even before you and I crossed paths. So this is pretty fantastic for me to even be in your orbit. I think you're being a bit modest. I do want to say I think a lot of entrepreneurs and people who aspire to be their own boss could probably benefit more from hearing about all the blood, sweat, and tears that you and your team put into this project, like the specifics of how you approached this, how you got it off the ground and got to today where it's really taking off in such a short period of time. Kudos to you.
Well, thanks, Anne. And we try to share as much as we can, but really the important thing is the team. We've got an incredible team here that's able just to put out the best possible content every single day. And we really couldn't do it without them, and we couldn't do it without your support. So thanks so much, Anne.
Absolutely. It takes a village. Thank you so much, Brett. Have a great rest of your weekend.
You too.
And you can get all your daily business news with the Peak Daily podcast. It's available for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts.